What's good, y'all? Solomon here. I hope you're having a great day. Before we get into today's Hippopotamus Defense video, I wanted to mention that I'm giving out a 30% off discount code for both of my online courses, including the Hippopotamus Defense. Okay, if you're interested in that 30% off sale, all you got to do is go down to the description below or the pinned comment. You will see the link there. Click on that link and plug in the discount code June 2024, and you will receive 30% off on the course. Okay, hundreds have gotten it. Many have told me that they have enjoyed it, and I'm not selling something I don't believe in. Okay, I really do believe in the Hippopotamus Defense as a very underrated, very strong weapon for white or black, either side. And I've used it exclusively as white and black to reach the National Master title in OTB tournament play. I beat GMs, IMs, and quite a few high-level players with it. And I don't say that to brag, but more to say that I really do think the Hippo works. There's a ton of benefits behind playing it. I think one of them is you're just taking your opponent out of their theory. I don't care what you play. If you play, let's say I'm playing as black. If you play the King's Indian attack, if you play the Danish gambit, if you play the Vienna game, it doesn't matter. Because when I play the Hippo, all that theory goes out the window. Okay, and your opponent's going to sit there and probably be kind of looking around like, what on earth's happening? I've never seen this in my life. You, on the other hand, you play it every game and you're growing in your comfortability. So yeah, I mean, I could keep going on why I think the Hippo is so strong. Again, I've been playing it exclusively as both colors and have been enjoying it a ton and getting pretty good results with it. So one other thing I do want to mention before getting into the video is that this course is not just for advanced Hippo players. Okay, it takes you from not knowing what the heck the Hippo is to a pretty strong level of mastery. That's the goal, right? So this is not like, oh, if you don't know X, Y, and Z, you can't get the course. I start at 0 and I build my way up from there. All that to say, if you do get the course, I hope you enjoy it, and I'll see y'all over in the main video. Let's get it. In today's video, we're going over a game by someone that you've probably heard of before, Garry Kasparov. Okay, many people call Garry Kasparov the greatest player of all time in chess, and yeah, here in this game, he's playing against Nigel Short back in the year of 2011 in an 8-game blitz match. Okay, up until this point, right? This is round 4 in their 8-round series. Kasparov right now is up 2-1, and he has the black pieces. Okay, now if you're up 2-1 at this level of play, I mean, elite GM, level, if you can hold a draw as black, that's a success. I mean, of course, we still want to look for opportunities to win, but if you can hold a draw as black, if you're up in a match or even tied in a match, that's a success, right? And it's really as white that you want to push for the win. But remember, a match, it's not like a tournament, right? You're not playing someone new every game. You're not, racing against everyone else to get the highest score. You're just playing one person. And as long as you end up on top at the end, you win, okay? Here, Garry Kasparov as black goes with the Hippo, okay? Bishop G7, D6. So far playing it just as I would. 1, 2, 3, right? Bishop C4 is played. By the way, if you see this, make sure not to play knight D7. You'd be losing now. Okay, King F8, Knight G5, what the heck's going on? If we take the bishop, even worse, Knight G5. If the king goes here, fork. If the king goes to E8, the queen cannot even move. King F6, we just got mated on move 7. So if you see that bishop in the Hippo going for F7, lock that thing down, right? Don't let that bishop see too far. Bishop B3 is played here. We have Knight E7, again, a move I would play here. B6, again, a move I would play. Bishop B7, Knight D7, H6. Queen E2. Up until this point, Kasparov has played move for move what I would think about as a Hippo player. Maybe at some point I'd play H6 earlier, I'm not sure, but his move order preference is pretty similar to mine. Of course, we're talking about Garry Kasparov here. Okay, so, at some point he's going to play something different than I would because he's Garry Kasparov. In this position, we have A5. I mean, what the heck, Garry? What are you doing out here, My goodness. In the Hippo, we usually try to play A6 and look towards B5. Now, in this case, A6, you could argue it's a little useless just based on the fact that this C pawn does have freedom to push, and because of that, B5 could become attacked or prevented. So A6 there might not be necessary. On top of that, there's really no pieces aiming towards B5 except the queen, and if your queen comes here, we do not care. We can just kick it out. So A5 is played, though. And this does weaken B5. It does. But I mean, Kasparov here going for some space. I probably would have thought about castling. Probably would have went castling here. That's probably what I would have played. And then just kept reading it out. Okay, castling is the top engine move, but A5 is not far behind it, going for A4, and that's what we see the next move. A4, castling kingside, A3. Kasparov going, you know what, I'm going to play a hippo and then just launch one of my pawns down the board to create some weaknesses. Notice, if white takes this, they just gave up a B pawn for an A pawn. Because of that, white has 2 pawn islands. As you can see, white's pawn structure is divided by a file. Because of that, they have 2 pawn islands. 1 island here and 1 island from there to the end of the board. Black, on the other hand, we gave up an A pawn on the very edge of the island. So all of our pawns are still intact, still very solid. We're attacking a pawn on C3. If you defend it with a move like knight B1, I personally like rook A7. Now, rook A8 might be easy to play, but I like rook A7 because the next move, I mean, let's just say white plays something. Queen A8 is an option. 2 battery rams, 1 piece involved in the back. We're threatening A2, we're threatening E4. Beautiful position for black. I mean, this is a dream position for myself. So A3, of course, I mean, we're talking about Nigel Short here. He's not going to make a silly mistake like taking that pawn and giving us activity and more. We see the move of B3. In this case, C5 was played. I think F5 was the way to go. I think that this is a slightly better move because in this case, we're looking to trap the bishop on E3, right? If you play a move like F4, all right, let's just keep chipping away towards that pawn, putting more and more pressure on it. Bishop F2 is the best move here. In that case, our queen has a little bit of breathing room to develop here while also connecting our rooks. And if you see a move like E5, knight FD5, dance that knight towards the center, attacking a ton of different spots, and the engineer gives a strong advantage to black. So F5, and by the way, if they take, we could take with the knight. This is playable. E takes F5 here is also playable because of the fact that we're trying to get that pawn off of the E file, and we're also threatening F4. And let's say you get your bishop some breathing room. Let's play knight D5, attacking the bishop, attacking the pawn. If you want to save your bishop pair and your pawn, and you drop that bishop back, rook E8 with tempo, the next move, we could play something like C5 or, throw a knight to F6. A lot of different stuff here, but black has a better game. However, we see instead the move of C5. Now, this doesn't really threaten anything like F5 did, right? F5 really threatens F4. C5, on the other hand, it puts some pressure on D4, but it is an improving move. I mean, rook A D1 is played. We have capturing. Now knight C6, putting more pressure on that pawn. Here, Nigel Short defends it. We have knight B4. Kasparov here going for the bishop. And then we have bishop A6, skewering the queen to the rook. I have had multiple games like this where I end up winning material because my opponent forgets that my bishop can do that tiny little move and just pick off our major piece because of it. But this is interesting because Kasparov hasn't played king h7 yet. And because of that, after queen d2, when we take the rook, now we have our knight threatened and our pawn, because our pawn doesn't have 2 defenders. It only has 1. Would we rather lose a pawn or a knight? Well, obviously we'd rather lose a pawn. So we bring our knight back. Nigel Short captures. We have knight f6. Notice here, white pushing either pawn isn't going to get, this isn't the move for white. Okay, this isn't going to change everything for them in a positive direction. Let's just say d5 is played. In that kind of instance, we can capture, play a move like knight e5. If you want to take, we can take back. You do have a passed pawn, but we have a ton of pressure on it. You could take our bishop all you want. We're going to take back if you support it. Queen takes d5 is shockingly the engine move. Sacrificing material, but trying to take advantage of the back rank later on. I would, even knowing that, I'd probably just play rook a5. This is a much more natural, safe, and also strong option. Now we're tripling up on that pawn. And notice here, if a move like d6, trying to push that pawn forward, rook d5. If the queen wants to run away somewhere, that's fine. Queen takes d6 on the way. And black here with a 1 endgame. Going back to knight f6, what about the move of e5? Well, this is even worse. We take on e5. And if you want to take with the knight, we go up a pawn. If you want to take with the pawn, we capture your queen. Very next move. Something like bishop takes. We can always play knight d7 and we're good there. And if you take with the knight, thanks for the bishop. You might think you're going to get our knight, and you do, but your knight's now hanging. bishop takes. Okay, so like usual, we're playing the hippo, and by white pushing one of their pawns, they're kind of just helping us out. So Nigel Short here instead plays rook d1, strengthening his pawn structure. We see e5 here. e5 is an interesting option. I mean, I personally would probably play something like rook c8. I'd think about rook c8 at the very least, and you know, just trying to gain some control on that file. But e5 is played. Now, if, you know, white takes, great, we'll take back. If a move like d5 was played, I'm assuming Kasparov was looking towards something like knight b8 and starting to kind of maneuver that knight around, fighting for some of those dark squares. White has space, but who cares? Because it's all locked down. And yeah, I mean, black has space as well on the queen side. But okay, e5 is played. We instead see bishop takes g7 and then knight f1. In this case, queen e7 is played, d5. Kasparov plays a move that kind of shocks me here. He gives up material, which is hardly ever good, especially in a position like this, right? But remember, at this point in the match, Kasparov's up 1 point, right? So Kasparov here doesn't need to fight for a win, right? I mean, and here he plays knight d4, and he seems to have confidence that he can draw this endgame. I would not do that personally. I would probably look towards something like, you know, knight b8 or knight a7 and then keep my material advantage that I have here. We are up the exchange and we're down a pawn. So, yeah, I mean, being up the exchange, that gives us a 2-point advantage. We're down a pawn. That's -1. So we're +1 at the moment. I would probably keep that myself. But instead we have knight d4. White captures it. We have queen e5, offering a trade. Short accepts it. Knight e3. We push our pawn. Going, you know what? The knight wants to go to c4, attacking 3 of our pawns at once. We're not going to have that. Let's play b5, prevent that knight from activating. White pushes the bishop forward to the d file, and in this case, we have rook a b8, simply defending that pawn. f3, let's activate the other rook. b4, knight e8, looking to really look towards a square like d6 if needed. Rook c3 is played. King f2, we bring the other rook over. Let's just imagine for a second Nigel Short would play something like h4, which he wouldn't because it's just a terrible move. In this case, guys, remember, a rook for 2 minor pieces? I'm taking the 2 minor pieces. I'm taking 2 minor pieces over a rook and a pawn. Sometimes I'm taking 2 minor pieces over a rook and 2 pawns, although that's where it gets a little bit dicey. In this case, we can take on c2, take again. We're +1 now, right? The next move. We could take this pawn, but then d6 happens, and this pawn's gonna promote unless we sacrifice for that pawn. So just remember, guys, just because something's hanging doesn't mean you should take it in the moment. On top of that, let's think about time here, right? There's some targets in chess where you can kind of just take it whenever you want. There's other times in chess where there's a target and it's like, yeah, I got to take it now, or I'll never get the chance to again. Okay. Now in this case, a2's attacked. We play knight d6. It turns out that black has time here. We're attacking the pawn. There's only one way for white to defend it, by playing rook a1. If white plays here, trying to attack our pawn, we don't care. We're still going to win their pawn. If they save their pawn, rook b2, we capture this guy off. Right? So in this kind of position, we have time. Right? After h4, we're going to take that knight, play a move like knight d6, stop their threats. Stop their threats. Play solid and sound chess. I'm taking a boring win any day of the week, month, year, season, decade, I don't care, over a heroic, complicated, crazy win that we barely pulled out. There's no reason to play rushed here. Block their threat, keep attacking. And again, the second they defend, we go after that pawn, we're simply winning. Of course, I mean, Nigel Short sees this, so he runs away with the knight. We now have knight d6, rook f8, and now rook c7. Yeah, I mean, Kasparov here really solidifying his rooks, potentially looking at an f5 break, breaking things open. We have g4 trying to prevent that push because we've put the rook behind that pawn. Rook h8 is played. The second that pawn pushes, again, anytime you push a pawn, a square does get weakened. Okay, let's go after the new target. Short defends it. We have g5, locking things up here. Rook h2, king f6, king e7, just centralizing that king a little bit, getting a little bit closer as well to that passed pawn. Knight c2 is played. We have f6, locking everything up nicely. You know, white can go for f5, but if they do, we're just going to take that knight right off. Although I would say instead of f6, I actually think that Kasparov missed an opportunity to push for a win here. And that was by playing this move of knight c4 with check. Now, let's say you see something like king e2. We play knight b2 now. This is the idea, right? By the way, taking the knight doesn't help white, okay? That just doesn't get the job done. We capture back with the rook. We're attacking your pawn. We're going to have another rook on the way, forming a battery ram. White's pawns are going to start falling off like candy. If a move like king e2 again, knight b2, we're attacking the bishop. You can't take this pawn unless you want to lose your knight. So we're going to win that bishop. And yeah, I mean, this is just great. And let's say something like king e1, we still play knight b2. This bishop, it's still stuck, guys. It can't move anywhere without losing that knight. So, or I mean, okay, fine. I guess you could play bishop c4 and save your knight, but then you just lost your bishop. So let's say king d2 is played here. All right, we take the bishop off, play a move like rook c4. As mentioned, we're looking at this square. If the knight moves, rook d4 check is an option. We could bring this rook over, form a battery ram. This king's in trouble. It's exposed. I know it's the end game, but still a lot of weaknesses, specifically these two pawns, and the pawn on f3 is feeling a little bit dicey as well. These are all weaknesses that we can go after. But okay, f6 was played by Kasparov here. He actually misses that knight c4 move a few times. We have rook c to c8, rook a8, a check, rook a b8. Kasparov here, it's pretty obvious he's not pushing too hard for a win. We take on h4, offer a trade. Okay, we get a trade there. Knight takes, rook h1, captures on b5. Both players here just trying to play active. We had a weakness there. And by the way, I mean, playing something like rook b8, that does work. I mean, that does hold the position together. But in general, I would probably recommend playing actively in the endgame instead of just trying to hang on to everything. Because usually if you're trying to hang on to everything, it's not going to work. Now, every once in a while, you can form a fortress, but that's very rare to pull off. I mean, if I'm thinking about fortresses, actual fortresses that I've had in my games, maybe it's just a weak spot for me. I don't know, but it doesn't seem like hanging on to everything forever usually works. It does sometimes, but I would say usually, especially in rook end games, you got to get that rook active. Instead of holding on to my pawn, I'm going to go, you know what, have it. I'm going to take one of yours. In this case, we have the move of rook h1. White takes, and here we have both sides agree to a draw. Is there a lot of game left here? Yes, there is. And honestly, I think either side has chances to win this. We have the exchange, but white also has 3 passed pawns right now, guys. I mean, this is dangerous for black going forward. But at the same time, I mean, if black can somehow capture that pawn on f3, then all of a sudden e4 is falling off, g4 is very weak, d5 is weak. The second this guy falls, the rest start to fall as well. So hope you enjoyed this game. Yeah, pretty interesting idea by Kasparov there, just pushing this pawn all the way to a3 and just trying to create some tension, some weaknesses, and some activity in a game like this. I'll see y'all in the next one. What's up, y'all? Solomon here. I hope you enjoyed this video. I appreciate y'all a ton. And if you haven't subscribed before, just a quick reminder, to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit that bell as well. If you're wanting more content like this to help you improve in your game and all that kind of stuff. And real quickly as well, I wanted to give a quick shout out to my Patreon supporters for the month of June in 2024. I appreciate y'all a ton. You guys are helping me do this full time. And yeah, I mean, if you haven't checked it out before, I highly recommend that you go check out some of the benefits that you gain by becoming a member. And I will see y'all in the next one. Peace.